Well, cactus friends of Cookie's Cacti, there's nothing that really makes the passage of time feel so fast than growing plants. Can you believe it? We are at 2 months now since my first video on sowing cactus from seed. I can't believe it. It is horrifying how fast time is passing. And it really reinforces the idea that if you've ever had a desire at all to grow cactus from seed, don't wait. Start now. So since the last update video, which was at 5 weeks old on my latest sowed seeds, if you remember... Hi, Cookie. If you remember at that time, at 5 weeks, I was already starting to deal with mold, algae, rot, and I was showing using fungicide at that time. And now let's see what has happened. So a few days after that video, I started to open up these vents, and I opened them up completely. And you can see there's 2 vents per dome, and opening it up is only, that big of an opening. And it was still very wet inside, of course, very humid. So I started to lift the side of the dome and creating a crack to allow air to go in. And then after a while, I put these, oh, there's a tail in the way. I put these clips on the side of the 1020 tray to allow the lip of the dome to sit on it to create this nice gap. And you can see that there is no condensation on the inside of these trays anymore. And it's really helped dry out the surface of the pots and actually allowed the pots themselves to dry out. So I've got 2 trays here for those of you who have been following me since the beginning of this cactus seed sowing journey. One of these trays has some older seedlings, which now at this point are between 4 and 5 months old, which are the ones in the majority of the pots in here in the back. And then the 6 pots here, so the 4 in the front and the 2 on the left in the second row were sowed 8 weeks ago. And then this tray is all pots that I sowed 8 weeks ago. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these trays and put them on the table. I'm going to take the domes off, and then let's take a look at how we're doing at 8 weeks. Alright, so I've got the domes off of these trays, and let's take a look at how we're doing. So let's start, let's see, this left tray is the one that are all 2 months old. This right tray has that mixture of 4 to 5 month olds. They're all Copiapoa, those 4 to 5 month olds. And then in the front here, these 2 pots on the left and then this first row are all the 2 month olds. So you could go back to some of my old videos and see what the progress is like. I would say we've got some mixed results here, so let's go ahead and take a look. And just as a reminder to everybody, I'm fairly new to growing, only about 1.5 years, maybe a little bit more now. And every time that I sow seeds, it's always slightly different. I haven't quite found that go-to procedure for me yet that's fail-proof. I'm still learning and I'm still experimenting and figuring things out. I have a feeling it's going to take at least 3 years to start to get a procedure down that works consistently. Right now it's not consistent. So let's see how we're doing this time around. So for my older seedlings that are between 4 and 5 months old, they're just about to enter that growth spurt for Copiapoa that I notice about that age, where one day they look like little teeny tiny seedlings, like, let's see if I have like that, and they grow, and then at 4 to 5 months old they hit that growth spurt and they start to look a little bit more like mini adults. You can see these are all Copiapoa calderana lumbecii, and lumbecii tend to have dark color spines. So you can see that some of these spines are dark. They actually started turning dark on some of these seedlings sooner than 4 to 5 months, but now it's more obvious. So if I zoom in here, see that seedling's got some nice spines to it, and there's some other ones over here and here. And as I'm panning over these pots, you'll see that the seedlings are kind of varying in size all over the place. And some pots germinated great, like this one. This is probably the most successful one out of all of these 4 to 5 month olds. And some of them are very sparse, like this one or this one. So it's all over the place. And you can see like some of the sizes of the seedlings are so tiny, like that one there. Like this pot has a lot of little seedlings in it. But then you have like this massive one next to them. So I don't know. I do find that seedling sizes do vary greatly, even from seeds within the same pack. So these guys are just on the cusp of hitting that growth spurt. The other interesting thing is, all of these pots are sitting in this 1020 tray, but there are like mini microclimates even within a space that's this small, because you'll see like this pot seems to be damp and wet, whereas the one right next to it is obvious that the top dressing is dry. And the one here too, dry. And then it goes kind of like wet again, which is kind of interesting. Same thing over here, you see on the sides and corners, got some green algae. Just looks a little more damp. Cookie. And then you move over a little bit and these are a lot drier. Alright, so now let's take a look at these 2-month-old seedlings. So here we've got the Copiapoa tigriensis, which was one of the pots that I demoed on sowing 10 seeds in the very first video in this series. And you can see there are 4 seedlings, and one of them is kind of on its side, so I'm going to have to help that guy out a little bit. They're growing pretty slow, this species. Next to that we have Ariocarpus fissuratus intermedius. Meh. Seedlings, I don't know. Doesn't look that impressive, but that's fine. And let me just kind of pan over these. This is not bad. This is a Copiapoa that I've never grown before. It's the first time. And this one's really underwhelming, but there's a few seedlings in there. And then here's the other tray. These are this front 4 Turbinicarpus are all from Rob Romero, from 3 Deserts on Etsy. You see fairly good germination, and there definitely have some deaths in here, but otherwise they're doing okay. And then we go to all the Mesa Garden seeds. These unlabeled ones are all Lembeckii, Copiapoa calderona Lembeckii. I think they're Var magnifica. And then we've got more Copiapoa. This Copiapoa margariza V. echinata I've never grown before. This is my first time. And this is the same one. Same seed pack, just split into 2 pots. Here's Copiapoa marginata, also another one I've never grown before. This is the first time. Split in 2 pots. And here's a Lembeckii magnifica, which I love so much. And this did quite well. Same seeds, split. And here we go with the Ariocarpus. You see how the Ariocarpus seedlings are kind of red? I think that's due to light sensitivity. I did put a second layer of that window screen to kind of help it out, but I don't think it's enough. This pot is actually fairly decent in terms of germination, but you definitely look stressed. Here's more Ariocarpus. This is retusis. Not a very successful pot. If you remember in my last video, these ones I think had a lot of mold in it, and since letting them air out and using some fungicide, it seemed to help for sure. I actually think that letting it air out had a more significant impact on getting rid of the mold than the fungicide did. Here's another Ariocarpus retusis. Also, you can see, sorry it's so dark, but you can see those little dark seedlings in there. They're definitely more light sensitive, these Ariocarpus. And then here's my last pot of Ariocarpus retusis. Sorry about the lighting again, it's so dark. See those little guys in there? Doing okay. For me, Ariocarpus seem to do okay up to this point, and then as they get older, they just die on me. I'm actually kind of on the cusp of giving up on growing Ariocarpus from seed. Or the next time I do it, I'm going to have to try maybe a different soil medium or something, because this soil medium seems to work great for Copiapoa, but for other cactus genus and species, I'm not very sure. One thing I do want to make a comment about is that the top dressing. So I mentioned in my first video that I like to use decomposed granite for the top dressing. But during that seed sowing round, I ran out of decomposed granite, so I was using the smaller grain pumice. And I like this better than the decomposed granite. The pumice seems to be more mold and algae resistant. Because if I kind of just go like this, you can see how this has green in it. That's decomposed granite. Like a lot of the ones with decomposed granite have a lot of algae in it, whereas many of the pots with pumice seems to stay pretty clean. So I think going forward, I'm going to switch over to pumice as my top dressing. You can still see this is pumice, but there's some green in it, but it's just not as bad as something like this, which is decomposed granite. This tray was a lot of decomposed granite, except for these two, which also has some algae. Algae is so hard to stay away from or to prevent or avoid. So now what I'm doing is, because these are being kept on the one of my lower shelves, I just kind of forget about that they're there until I'm like, wait a second, I should go and check on them. And so you can see that the top dressing looks fairly dry right now, and the way I can tell how dried out these pots are at this point is just by picking up the pots and feeling the weight of the pots. So the soil medium I'm using is very light, and all this top dressing is quite light as well. So you can tell when the pots have a lot of water content in them versus when they're dry. Like these are pretty light right now. So what I've been doing is when mold still shows up, I am still trying to spray fungicide on it. It's not very often right now. I'm not seeing anything obviously affecting the seedlings as far as fungicide goes. How effective it is against the mold and the algae, I'm still not 100% sure. I think it helps, but it's not like it's just a magic potion that gets rid of all the mold. The algae is definitely unaffected. So it could be that the concentration I'm using maybe is not strong enough. I'm not sure. So still figuring that out. But leaving the dome slightly open to let them dry out definitely helps control the mold. And the other thing is, like on my, you see I have a fan for my seedlings on this upper half of the shelf. Letting airflow really helps with mold control as well. I don't have a fan on my bottom shelf yet, so that might be something I'm going to do next, which is to put another little fan, but on the bottom shelf, let the air circulate. Maybe it'll help with the mold a bit more. So as far as moisture control goes right now that these guys are 2 months old, these guys are 4 months old, I'm starting to water them kind of like my older seedlings. The way I water is very not scientific. So when I feel like they're drying out, I water them. So how do I water them? Okay, those of you who are really good and perfectionists about growing plants, you're going to be horrified by this, but let me show you. So I know some growers like to bottom water, meaning that they'll just fill these trays up and let the pots soak in them. But for me, I had problems with that. Just had troubles with bottom watering. Like my seedlings would tend to rot from that. So I just don't do that. It's possible I was just doing it wrong or my conditions weren't right. So the way that I like to water, I like hand watering. And so I use these 32-ounce squeeze bottles. So here, get ready to be horrified. Look at all that green stuff in there. I can't control it. Like periodically, I'll put some fungicide in here and it will kill off the algae and clear up the bottles. But after a while, it just shows up again. And I kind of gave up. So I got these squeeze bottles off of Amazon. So this particular one is 32 ounces. I fill it with water. Okay, so what kind of water am I using? I'm using tap water that's been acidified with a little bit of white vinegar because our pH level is high, on the high end. And I also have fertilizer in here. Let me go outside and show you what fertilizer and how I'm mixing up the water. Alright, so for the water I use on all of my seedlings inside the house, what I do is I have a 5-gallon bucket that I just keep outdoors. It's filled with just tap water from the hose. And then what I do is I add white vinegar to it, like this, like real general white vinegar that you can buy for really cheap. And what I did was a while ago, I was using like fish water test strips to kind of get the pH level of this acidified water to match somewhat the rainwater pH. And it might not actually be low enough in terms of acidity, but I think that's fine. And then what I do add in here is fertilizer. So let me show you the fertilizer I use. I have this fertilizer that I bought from the Cactus Society. It was an entire gallon bag like this for $5. I don't think they sell it anymore. But you can see the NPK ratio is 10:16:38, which is pretty strong. So I dilute this down to 1/10 of it, so it gets it roughly to about 1.6 to 3.8. Why did I do that? Because a lot of cactus fertilizers are something like 1:1:2 or 1:2:2, so diluting this down 10 times gets kind of close to that ratio. So I just put 1/10 of whatever instructions they have here into the 5-gallon bucket, and it's kind of dark because this stuff has a blue color tint to it. So this is the water that I use on all my seedlings inside. I'm not using them on the seedlings in my shade house because I'm too lazy. You can see, very not scientific. So this is the water that's in my squeeze bottles. Alright, so that's water that I showed you outside. That's what's in here. I just can't control this green algae. Anyway. So some of these pots are pretty dry on the top, as you can tell from the top dressing, and when I pick up the pots they're pretty light. So let me just show you how I water this. So I literally take this squeeze bottle, and it's very not scientific. I literally just top water the seedlings like this. And I don't have really a specified amount that I'm putting in these very young seedlings. I just try not to let these very young ones dry out too much. And I guess you can say I'm watering it to not quite to the point of where the water is coming out the bottom of the pot. I'm a little bit more exact with the older seedlings, but when they're young like this, I just kind of wing it. Alright, so that is my seedling update for these 2-month-old seedlings and these 4 to 5-month-old seedlings. And I'll probably be back next month with a 3-month update. So talk to you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye. One last thing, as I was looking through these seedlings, every once in a while you'll get something that looks odd. Look at this one. This is Copiapoa lumbeckii KK70. The other ones, and then there's this one. Why is it so fluffy? Oftentimes the strange ones don't live very long, so I don't really hold my hopes up for them, but it's still fun to see them pop up here and there.